Good evening. Oh, I'm so sorry. I must not have done a good job at that. Let me try again. Good evening. Okay, perfect. But let's just try one more time because we have a phenomenal speaker who has flown in from San Francisco to be with us this evening. And I have already shared with her that the audience here at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts is the best audience in the world. Yes. And even though they have some great museums in San Francisco, certainly they do. She has just discovered today the best museum in the world. So please help me with a warm, boisterous good evening. Good evening. And welcome to Jill D'Alessandro. Fantastic. It's so incredibly wonderful to see so many of you in the audience this evening. Some of you I haven't seen since pre-pandemic. So this feels really good. Thank you so much for being here this evening. And welcome to a very special night, an honored evening. Tonight is the second annual Joy Light Lecture in East Asian Arts. And it is my distinct pleasure to host this evening's event. My name is Belinda Tate. I am the executive director here at the KIA. If any of you are new, welcome. And most of you will know already that due to the generosity provided to the KIA through a transformational gift that we utilize entitled the Joy Light East Asian Art and Acquisition Fund, we are able to provide stellar programs such as this one to our community. This gift has allowed us to consistently provide high quality exhibitions and to acquire important works of art by artists from Japan, Korea, and China for the benefit of our community. And this gift allows us to sustain an incredible and unique program in West Michigan, demonstrating this level of commitment to educating the community about the arts and culture of East Asia. And for this gift, we are so very grateful to Tim and to Joy Light. And I must say before we applaud, Joy is the most wonderful partner in helping to make sure that these programs are engaging and exciting for the entire community. So thank you both. So tonight is a very special evening, and I had the privilege of having lunch with our guest speaker, Jill D'Alessandro, and she is dynamic. She is a real powerhouse. She's a true scholar. She is someone that has been in the field of textiles and fashion for many years, and she's bringing to us this evening a tremendous depth of knowledge. And Jill is the curator in charge of costume and textile arts at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco. And in her position, she oversees a collection of over 13,000 costumes and textiles from 125 countries around the world. I read that earlier and I thought, well, she must never want for anything to wear. Since 2002, Jill has developed numerous exhibitions on a diverse variety of subjects, ranging from world textile traditions to the 20th and 21st century fashion design. The broad scope of the museum's collections have deeply informed D'Alessandro's worldview, and she is interested in the study of textile arts as a vehicle to draw connections across cultures. Jill's recent projects include the Summer of Love Experience, Art, Fashion, and Rock and Roll, 2017, and Contemporary Muslim Fashions from 2018. She earned her bachelor's degree from Scripps College in Claremont, California, and her master's degree from Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in textile arts. And in 1998, she received a Fulbright Scholarship to study in South Korea, where she focused on traditional hand papermaking techniques and their applications in contemporary art. In 2022, Jill curated and contributed to the catalog for Guo Pei, Couture Fantasy at the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, which she will describe in more detail tonight. Finally, I want to share my gratitude for Jill's ongoing work to bring this exhibition's story to places like Kalamazoo. As we celebrate Jill's incredible Guo Pei Couture Fantasy this evening, I hope, Jill, that you will enjoy us as much as we anticipate enjoying you. So before I welcome Jill, at the end of this talk, I'll come back up and give you a brief overview of the exquisite exhibition that's on view right now in the Joylight Gallery of East Asian Art. But for the moment, one more time, please help me welcome Jill D'Alessandro. Thank you so much, Belinda, and thank you, the Kalamazoo Art Institute, for inviting me, and Shannon and Brahima. It's been wonderful to be here, and especially Mrs. Joylight. Thank you for the invitation. When I was applying to college, my father wanted me to apply to Kalamazoo because he said, it'll just make me happy every time somebody asks me where my daughter goes to school. And now I know what he meant. I feel happy being here. So by any measures, Guo Pei has lived a remarkable life, spanning the privileges of China's Cultural Revolution that took place between 1966 and 1976, to the height of international fashion world, where in 2016, she became the second designer born and educated in China to become a guest member. Focuses on some of the designer's works from the past 2 decades, highlighting her most important collections shown on both Beijing and Paris runways. The exhibition and accompanying catalog reveal how Guo's work and aesthetic philosophy are deeply rooted in her cultural heritage, further shaped by China's modern history. The trajectory of her exceptional career is thus significant on an individual level, but also emblematic of China's emergence as a powerful global actor. As the designer herself acknowledges, I am a product of changing China. Okay. Guo Pei, can you use this better? Okay. Guo Pei was born in Beijing in 1967 at the start of the Cultural Revolution. Her father was a platoon leader who wore his uniform throughout his life, even after retirement. Despite their daughter's success, her parents have continued to adhere to an austere lifestyle consistent with Maoist principles. Being raised during this period had immense impact on the future designer. Guo describes the time as monotonous, with very few books, games, or even activities outside of the home. She learned how to sew by helping her mother, whose eyesight was failing, and at age 2. As was common in the era, women made their own homemade clothes for their families. Guo could thread a needle by age 2. In her youth, Guo found both solace and inspiration in her maternal grandmother, whose upbringing during the twilight of China's last imperial era, the Qing dynasty, starkly contrasted with that of her own granddaughters. Guo's great-grandfather was a wealthy landlord who spoke English and had worked in the American embassy. Her grandmother was educated in a small private school and, consistent with the women from elite families, was an adept needleworker who excelled in the art of embroidery, which for centuries had been not just a pastime, but of a measure of a woman's worth. According to the Chinese cultural historian Dorothy Ko, embroidery was more than a skill that daughters learned from their mothers. It was a conduit for female culture that one generation of gentry women passed on to the next, along with their emotions and dreams. During the Cultural Revolution, Guo's grandmother was forced to destroy all her personal possessions, including her clothing, jewelry, and photographs, and her family was closely watched by the Red Guards. Guo describes this deep nostalgia her grandmother had for beautiful clothes, now destroyed, which represented far more than just silk and thread. She would regale her young granddaughter with stories of beautiful silken robes, and her details of the embroidered butterflies were so vivid that Guo Pei imagined they were three-dimensional and could fly. And so here you see a detail from an embroidered robe, Qing Dynasty robe in the Fine Arts Museum's collection, and a translation by Guo Pei. And that's Guo Pei on the right, a young Guo Pei, probably age 2. Over the course of several Zoom interviews, I discovered that her childhood influences went much further than visions of exquisite embroidery. Guo reminisced about the evening walks in nearby Rattan Park, seen here, which fueled an appreciation for both nature and architecture. She also spoke about the love of theater. Indeed, the theatrical nature of Guo Pei's work is immediately apparent. I grew to understand that the interrelationship between theater and fashion is deep-rooted in Chinese sartorial practices. And even during the Cultural Revolution, costume designers continued to create clothing design for popular drama groups and film. Through these series of interviews, the recurring themes of Guo Pei's designs, China's imperial past, the grandeur of the European court life and architecture, theater, and the botanical world would emerge and inform the arrangements of the temporary downstairs galleries, which I will discuss later. The Cultural Revolution ended in 1976 with the death of Mao, and in 1978, Deng Xiaoping took over as paramount leader of China. Deng ushered in a period of sweeping reforms aimed at correcting the misdoings of the Cultural Revolution and making China's economy more viable on an international level. One of the first acts was the reintroduction of the National College entrance exam to all universities. In 1982, at age 15, Guo was the first class of students accepted into the Beijing Second Light Industry School, one of the approximately 30 newly established government-operated fashion programs that were instituted as part of Deng's reform policies. These programs and their first generation of graduates, including Guo, formed the foundation of the Chinese fashion industry. Fashion scholar Zhuang Wu describes the impact of the programs on the nascent industry. The development of Chinese fashion industry was closely linked with the development of Chinese fashion education system. Nearly all of China's most influential fashion designers of the 1990s and 2000s were products of a state-run system. And there you see her as a college student and what an average person would have been wearing while she was in college in the 1980s. At the time of Guo's enrollment, Chinese fashion programs were very much in their infancy, and their emphasis was primarily on fashion illustration and drawing. The fact that the students were recruited on the basis of the portrait sketches and paintings meant that the program's first wave of enrollees included more aspiring artists than fledgling fashion designers. Guo's graduation project would prove to be pivotal. Having recently watched Gone with the Wind, she became enthralled with a large hoop skirt worn by the women in the film. She drew a connection between the dresses of the old American South and the European court dress that she had read about in Western novels. For her final project, she opted to design a westernized version of a wedding dress, consulting her professor on how to achieve the necessary grand scale. He directed her to the Beijing People's Art Theater, which frequently staged productions, including European royal courts. To this day, Guo vividly recalls her experience. She says, "I remember meeting the doorman who was so encouraging and let me in. At that time, Chinese people were very willing to help each other. She saw on that visit how the costume designers created replicas of the European court dress, using a bamboo as an armature to achieve the volume, opposed to a hoop skirt." Upon graduation, so here you see on the left an example from the 1980s of performance, theater performance. Upon graduation, Guo Pei and her classmates were all given government-funded jobs. She stayed only 1 year before moving on to one of China's first privately owned fashion companies, Tianma, where she quickly distinguished herself as one of the top performers. In fact, some of her designs were being produced 50,000 times, and a favorite pastime was to count the number of people wearing her designs on the bus ride home, and she got up to 300 pieces one time. However, she felt creatively stagnated at Tianma, and in 1995, Guo took a high-paying position as chief designer at the Peking Milano Fashion Company, a Taiwanese-U.S. joint venture. She longed for the excitement of creating luxurious gowns, but thus, before accepting the post, Guo negotiated the terms of employment. She would continue to design for the company as long as they allowed her to design her own collection. In 1996, 10 years after graduation, she finally made her another large skirt. Her runway presentation for the 1996 Peking Fashion Week, approaching 1997, was expansive in scope. It evolved from demure, boxy separates and neutral shades of taupe and brown designed for the empire, but for the finale, a series of brightly colored satin skirts with wide paniers and tulle petticoats mixed with fitted wool corsets sashay down the runway, which you see here on the right. The success of this breakthrough collection was immediate, and in 1997, Guo was recognized by the state-funded China Fashion Association as one of the country's 10 best designers. That same year, Guo, like many of her generation, left her large manufacturing company to establish her own design house, Rose Studio, named after her favorite flower. During this period, Guo met and married her husband and business partner, Jack Sao. She recalls that the first few years of operating the business were difficult. She ran through her savings in just 6 months. And she readily acknowledges that she would not have survived if it had not been for the financial support and business acumen of Cao, a successful businessman and importer of luxury European textiles. After decades of creating ready-to-wear, Guo wanted to turn her attention toward custom-made dressmaking, and she credits Cao for encouraging this transition. So you're going to see a huge transition at this moment. In her next major breakthrough, so when she started Rose Studio, it was all bespoke clothing, ready to wear for private clients. And she said, China was newly emerging. There's a lot of wealthy clients who encouraged her to be her artistic best. But her next major breakthrough would not occur until 2006, when she presented the Samsara collection during the China International Fashion Week in Beijing. The grand finale featured this gown, Dajin, magnificent gold. Constructed of individual panels, it was completely embroidered in gold catching technique, Beijing. Created in a repeat pattern of a lotus pod or the trailing plants, symbols of everlasting exuberance and the purity of mind in Chinese culture. For Guo, Dajing represents the birth of Chinese culture. She explains, during the Cultural Revolution, they destroyed their culture, but my generation found it again. I see this as a kind of reincarnation, like the sun rising out of darkness. It is reborn. Dajing represents the sun. Hailed as the advent of Chinese couture in the 2006 Samsara runway presentation, was a catalyst for the next phase of Guo Pei's career. Her creative output blossomed. And I want to say that the piece took 50,000 hours and a total of 2 years to create. And she spent a total of $1 million on the production, which includes the materials, but also the staff time. And she told me in an interview that she put everything on the line. It was either going to make her career or break her. And clearly it made her career. And here you're seeing it installed in the galleries, the upstairs galleries at the Legion of Honor. The exhibition is in our temporary spaces, but we also integrated the galleries into our European decorative arts and paintings galleries. Over the next decade, she would both dress China's top actresses and conceive of a series of elaborate runway presentations every 2 to 3 years for the China Fashion Week. An Amazing Journey of Childhood Dream, 1002 Nights, Legend of the Dragon, followed by a highly celebrated commission for MAC Cosmetics, Garden of Soul, as well as costume design for 2 opera productions, Tosca, staged by the Beijing National Center for Performing Arts in 2009, and 2 Bells in Love at the Beijing Poly Theater in 2010. These collections trace the emergence of Guo as a fully realized couturier, with her runway presentations verging on the level of theatrical productions. She views these productions as pure artistic creation, created without commercial concern. She says, in my life, I create 2 types of design. The first type is a design in a realistic and wearable. It serves people and enters their lives, even helps them change their lives. The other design for me is for me. I give it my and might, not to be worn by anyone. They are closer to art. And it is those pieces, those sort of pure artistic expression, which are on display for the most part in the exhibition. So on the right, you see Zhang Ziyi, a Chinese actress, wearing a piece that she would make for one of her private clients. And then the sort of show-stopping piece from one of her runway presentations that Rihanna wore at the Met Gala, which is how Guo Pei became so well known in the West. So, Guo Pei Couture Fantasy. Widely hailed as China's premier couturier, Beijing-based fashion designer Guo Pei uses exquisite craftsmanship, lavish embroidery, and unconventional dressmaking techniques to create a sartorial fantasy one that fuses her personal story with myriad influences: China's imperial past and export art, the grandeur of European court life and architecture, theater, and the botanical world. Her 4-decade-long career is distinguished by artistic innovation and transcultural perspective. This global worldview manifests itself in her designs, which draw equally from Asian and European aesthetic traditions to occupy a space between fashion, theater, performance, and sculpture. Guo Pei Couture Fantasy focuses on some of the designer's extraordinary work from the past 2 decades. This presentation highlights the most important collections to reveal her work and artistic approach are both deeply rooted in her heritage and shaped by the evolution of China's fashion industry. For Guo Pei, this exhibition which examines her couture designs through both a cultural and art historical lens, allows her work to be looked at anew. So, as you enter the exhibition, the first gallery is dedicated to her 2007 runway presentation, An Amazing Journey in a Childhood Dream. Guo Pei created this collection while pregnant with her second daughter, envisioning as it a materialized dream of a little girl whose Barbie dolls came to life. This theatrical production started with a little girl wearing a white nightgown, walking up the runway, dragging a big fluffy white pillow. And she goes and she crawls into a daybed. And as she falls asleep, the models seem to sort of act out her dreams, prancing out in these pastel colored silk confections constructed of tightly folded silks, evoking the self-made origami toys that Guo Pei had as a child. She paired these garments with the separates, embellished with raised metallic thread embroidery, an homage to the bejeweled costumes donned by the Spanish matadors during bullfights. The overlay of personal experience with artistic influences was a stunning instance of Guo Pei's signature fusion of design traditions. And I believe that this collection aptly displays Guo Pei's artistic mythologies. Each collection starts with an abstract concept, a spark of inspiration drawn from a wide range of sources. Through this postmodernist approach, she layers meanings and imagery, forming a bricolage of opulent surfaces that she superimposes on sculptural silhouettes. And we see this throughout her collections. The next gallery is dedicated to the botanical world with 2 collections. The first you see here is the Garden of Soul. Created in 2015, a special commission for MAC Cosmetics, the Garden of Soul was inspired by flowers in blossom. Guo cites the Chinese idiom, one flower, one world, one life, one awakening, to explain how she sees the flowers as an expression of happiness, joy, and pleasure. In the Chinese art, literature, and material culture, there exists a long tradition of employing floral motifs, also associated with femininity and womanhood, as symbols of promise and new beginnings. Each flower represents a specific idea. Guo updates the tradition here through both the garment's construction, where the volume is achieved through multiple layers of silk, wrapped to evoke the flower petal, and richly embellished surfaces, illustrating the colorful array of floral motifs. Appearing most prominently are the iris, a symbol of springtime, and the lingsy mushroom, seen on the yellow ensemble on the right, a symbol of success, well-being, divine power, and longevity. And the printed leaves of the sweet flag. The latter, a native to China, is believed to have the magical quantities. Seeing a sweet flag in bloom is an omen of good fortune and intelligence. I should point out that everything is made in her studio, including the shoes and the jewelry. And as Guo Pei explained, it's very different than the Parisian system, where you have a specialized atelier for each craft. China, again, she's emerging, she's building these foundations, her atelier from scratch. She said, I was handed a blank piece of paper. Okay, I'm gonna go back. On the left, we see a garment that this garment's floral iconography and voluptuous silhouette suggests themes of female fertility and empowerment. Its playful reworking of the 19th century undergarments parallels the practices of contemporary designers such as Vivienne Westwood and Jean-Paul Gaultier, whose fashions throughout their careers have reinterpreted the underpinnings from historical dress, such as the representation of the corset as outerwear and the introduction of dramatically shortened crinoline. Here we see the selection for Olisson. Olisson was her 5th collection during the Paris Couture Week. And this is really when you see Guo Pei starting to show her own sort of artistic expression in Paris. Her first 4 collections, when she was showing in Paris, was a little bit more straightforward. She had initially decided, and she was encouraged by her Paris team, to make beautiful wearable things. And she did that for 4 collections. And then she went back to what she likes to do, which is make more playful, theatrical dress. So here in the 5th collection, she was creating during the final months of her father's life. Deeply personal, the collection continues her exploration of the botanical world. For the designer, Olisson represents a spiritual paradise. In Greek mythology, it's a land of perfect happiness, a place where gods obtain immortality. Guo Pei likens the idea to the concept of pure land or Western paradise in Mahayana Buddhism. Inspired by plants' regenerative root system structures, which she sees as an analogy for immortal life, the designer used natural fibers such as bamboo and raffia. Collaborating with export bamboo artisans from Hongshui in the Anhui, China, she remarks, Olisson will free every soul to embrace beauty, understand the true meaning in life, and ultimately find the roots of one's own soul. And in the center, we see one of the pieces, which I see as being self-historicizing elements. As we recall, during her college years, she went to the China Beijing Theater, People's Theater, and they showed her how to make the undergarments out of bamboo. So she went to the master bamboo basket makers and had them make these structures for her. For this collection, used the same material for the collection, collaborating with artisans from an area that's renowned from it. The skirt is unique design with the inner support structure acting as the outer garment, and its gold surface serves to highlight the mastery. So here we see global narratives infuse her designs, echoing the historicizing tendencies that we saw in the Garden of Soul collection. Here, the ensemble on the left, the ensemble's low neckline, elongated waist, and exaggerated bustle, projecting into the smaller back, are reminiscent of the distinct underpinnings and silhouettes of the late 19th century fashionable Western dress. Guo referenced frequently. However, her choice of raffia as a material is worn by the deceased during traditional Chinese funeral adds another layer of meaning. And then on the right, you see this wonderful dress, and inside it has these gold foil that is reminiscent of the burning of the folded joss paper. also done during a funerary season. This design, also from the Olisum collection, it was the grand finale. And here we see it also made of a bamboo basket weaving. Its dramatic elliptical form can be interpreted as a boat carrying a person from one realm to another. And this picture, you'll get a sense of her unconditional dressmaking techniques as it sort of almost opens up like a wicker basket. Here we also it is listed that it took 10,000 members to create. And had a number of advisory board working on this exhibition. And Ellen Huang, professor at Stanford, noted that also has a sort of symbolic meaning in Chinese culture. 10,000 is what the number of hours to create mastery, but it also is a significant number in Buddhism, and that there's oftentimes a play with numbers in Chinese culture. We enter into the next gallery. If you were at the Legion with me, you would be following me into the next gallery, and this is dedicated to the influence of European art on her work. Again, she is showing in Paris. The Legends collection was held at the Paris Concierge, the revolutionary prison where Marie Antoinette was detained prior to her execution. The collection was inspired by the 18th century cathedral at St. Gallen in Switzerland. Awed by the chapel's beauty and history, Guo Pei challenged Martin Leopold, the creative director of Jacob Schleifer textile manufacturing, to design a fabric that captured the effects of sunlight streaming through the windows. To achieve this effect, he developed a fabric woven from a blend of gold metallic and silk threads and printed with the painted images of the cathedral arched domes. And there you see an image of the cathedral. And Guo Pei showcased a spectacular array of designs on the runway, presenting women as empowered and in positions of authority. A heroine warrior dressed for battle, a high priestess in a golden cassock and embroidered chasuble paraded down the storied halls, freely borrowing from Catholic visual culture and mixing the sacred with the profane. Guo Pei explains, "I've been really moved by Western architecture, culture, and history. I'm curious. It is this strong curiosity that has mesmerized me. I want to know the stories of the West, like Westerners want to know about the East." And I paired it with this quote, and you'll see some of these. Part of the reason why the install took so long is oftentimes some of her shoes are 13 to 16 inches high. The next collection, Architecture, was for her 2018-2019 runway presentation, which she showed at the City of Architecture Museum in Paris. The museum's extensive collections of Romanesque, Gothic, and neoclassical architectural models served as the collection's inspiration. Truly innovative, these constructions reveal the influence of architecture on Guo Pei's design principles, a relationship present throughout her career, but not explicit until this collection. In her hands, flying buttresses were translated into wide paniers of translucent fabrics, and armatures were expressed through wire and stiffened fabrics. Other gowns executed solely in black showcase the detailed embroidery work of Guo Pei's atelier, Grow Studio. Striving to foster a dialogue between the human body and spatial dimensions, she explains, it is through architecture that mankind has relentlessly applied their technologies to surpass themselves, expressing their thoughts and imaginations about space, thus attaining miraculous glories. She continues, in both fashion and architecture are so many works that express a transcendental spiritual realm, a pursuit of the soul, of a spirit space. And then I wanted to point out, here you see the large bustle taking from historic dress, and how some Western designers and Japanese designers have used it in the past. So I want to put her within that canon of contemporary 20th and 21st century design. But of course, she puts her own play on it. And so where you couldn't see on the side her love of theater, as you turn, there's a full theatrical production in the back of the dress. In the exhibition, I love to point out this dress, because this is in fact the dress that the entire exhibition design was based off of. She was inspired by an early childhood memory. So when you meet Guo Pei or you have these conversations with her, it might not be surprising to you, but she sees like the macrocosm in the microcosm. So if you ask her a question about something, what's this collection about? And she'll talk about one piece for 40 minutes. I mean, she really goes into detail. So we had our first meeting with our exhibition designer, and she only spoke to him about this one dress. So of course the exhibition design was all based off of this one dress, which was based off of a carousel lamp in her that she had as a child. Again, the influence of childhood memories. But she used that as a metaphor to talk about the influence of theater, shadow, and light on her work. And so unfortunately, this picture doesn't show it well enough, but if you look inside it, the different panels they're see-through, they're sheer, and you can see that it's embroidered in there, street scenes, people afoot and cars and plants and dogs running in the streets. We enter into the next gallery, and this shows her the influence of Asian heritage on her work. China's imperial past was the focus of Guo Pei's spring-summer 2019 collection, East Palace. For this collection, presented at the Palace de Tokyo in Paris, the designer created a rendition of the Hall of Supreme Harmony located in Beijing's Forbidden City. Inspired by the women she envisioned living in the Forbidden City during the Qing dynasty, the designs on the runway drew from the sartorial practices of what China's final dynasty, including tiny shorts revealing qipao and stilettos carved with dragons on their heels. This contemporary reinterpretation might appear fetishizing. However, Guo Pei's self-orientalizing approach, her embrace of exoticizing stereotypes, can be understood as an expression of cultural pride and the effort to subvert the Western gaze by reclaiming authorship of traditional Chinese motifs. For example, on the left, Guo reinterprets the cloud collar, an important dress element worn by the cultured and educated women during the mid to late Qing dynasty for special occasions such as weddings. Emboldening and contemporary, this look pairs the collar with a crop top shorts and thigh-high gaiters embroidered with couch gold threads and emblazoned with the images of the imperial dragon. For Guo Pei, the collection celebrated not only the women who donned the elaborate robes, but also the skilled needleworkers who created the garments for Qing nobility. She says, since ancient times, the court art has represented the highest standards, as the imperial court was able to command the services of the best craftsmen. The collection was a tour de force of textile techniques, showcases Guo Pei's love for traditional crafts while reimagining them in a contemporary context. And here we see, this is one of the pieces that she wanted to speak about the most, and she went into great detail. Distinguished by its characteristic high shoulders, the costumes of the Outer Mongolian Kafka woman served as Guo's inspiration for the exquisite coat. The richly embroidered in silk with images of the dragon, flying fish, and flaming pearl amid crashing waves. The dress beneath it is made of a very unique lacquered mother of pearl fabric. Guo sourced this innovative fabric from a family workshop, Tamiya Raiden, located in the Kyoto prefecture in Japan. Referred to Raiden Ori, the fabric is a late 20th century invention by Katsuchiro Tamiya that combines two historic techniques, lacquerware and gilt thread weaving. In Tamiya's process, thin sheets of mother of pearl are shaved from the inside of the shell and applied to mulberry paper in a method similar to the one used for decorative lacquerware, but also gilt gold thread paper weaving. The shell paper is then cut into thin strips, which are woven into the fabric. Guo Pei uses this Ramen Ori exemplifies her interest in working with companies that are expanding the possibilities of textile technologies. The Himalaya collection. For her spring-summer 2020 presentation, Guo Pei was drawn to the Himalayan mountain range, a holy place for many cultures. The garment's soft silhouettes asymmetrically draped across the body with drooped waistline and exaggerated sleeves and cascading to the floor were inspired by traditional Tibetan robes. Paramount to this, interpreting this collection is the designer's choice of fabric, where she repurposed her own collection of Japanese obis. The soft whites were used in different stages of snowfall, permeate the collection as homage to the rare snow lotus found in the high snow-crusted Himalayan mountain range. As she explains, Himalaya is a place that has brought me countless fantasies, but never fulfilled. For thousands of years, it has summarized the road to truth, the residence of the gods, the temple of the soul. And here that was the centerpiece on the platform. Since establishing her atelier, Rose Studio, in 1997, Guo Pei has used an illustrated books of tankas or Tibetan Buddhist paintings as a teaching resource for the artisans with whom she works. By utilizing the book's imagery, the studio creates a grand-scale embroidered tankas as a means to practice their stitches and study color composition. For the designer, this ensemble represents the years of work and the dedicated, skilled embroiderers that have contributed to the pursuit of the vision. And on the right, that is an embroidered tanka that one of her studios made. It was 3 meters in length, and she agreed to show it in the exhibition, but it was the one thing that didn't make it. Of course, we put this entire exhibition together during COVID, and it was an oversized crate, and because it was being shipped out during the Olympics, they said it was like too big because of all the dignitaries. I have no idea, but anyway, I was so disappointed because I was so happy that we were going to be the one venue that would get to display one of these beautiful tankas. And then in the final gallery was dedicated to the alternate universe. These outwardly, in her fall winter. So we put things out of, we didn't do everything chronological. We did it more thematic. Alternate universe, Guo Pei envisions an afterlife in which animals preside over humanity. It is in this elaborate fantasy she fuses a multiplicity of references from the parables of Aesop's fables to the silhouettes of late 17th and 18th century court dress, ecclesiastical vestments, Salvador Dali's jewelries with a principle of reincarnation. This is that sort of same bricolage of layers of meanings. The runway presentation opened with 2 models wearing
wearing one oversized dress, symbolizing the coexistence of two worlds in one space. Abundant portrayals of animal kingdoms appear, rendered in raised embroidery techniques of silk threads, pearls, feathers, and Swarovski crystals, set against this billowing substrate of transparent piña cloth sourced from the Philippines. The monkey, the monkey assumes the position of the puppeteer, guiding the fates of the others, while crows serve as the messenger of wisdoms, bridging the realm between life and death. In this collection, Guo Pei cautions her audience to be respectful of animal life. Our soul might transmigrate or reincarnate between the life forms. So if today we don't care about certain animals, in the next life we might become an animal, like a bird or a monkey. So I read all these Aesop's fables trying to find that fable, but it was Guo creating her own Aesop's fable. So here we see the two models, but if you look in here, there's ram's heads, griffins, snakes, and crows. In the center of here, you'll see that is a monkey holding the circus ring and the human jumping through it. So she's turned things on their back. And for this ensemble, again, it's set like a stage, but she asked different people in her atelier to make a doll, but to leave their face blank because their fate had not been determined. It was going to be controlled by the monkey puppeteer. And just to quickly, another piece from that collection, but I wanted to show the reference to Salvador Dali's jewelry design. So that's a Dali jewelry design on the left. And I'm going to speed up. Just wanted to quickly, we had in a side gallery, it was all dedicated to the embroidery techniques. And we borrowed two beautiful Qing Dynasty robes from the Asian Art Museum and paired them from the different collections. So there's the pairing. And in there, we actually spelled out the actual embroidery techniques in both English and in translated Chinese. And now we enter up to the upstairs galleries. Upstairs in our permanent collection galleries, Guo's designs enliven the space. Drawing from both Asian and European traditions, the opulence and beauty of Guo Pei's designs make for the perfect fit within the neoclassical architecture and the collections at the Legion of Honor. To note, Guo Pei's recall of the gallery from her January 2020 visit were remarkable. While the traditional Chinese motifs permeate many of Guo Pei's collections, her designs themselves are not classically Chinese. Rather, they are an amalgamation of myriad cultural and artistic influences. In this way, her designs reflect both contemporary fashion practices that challenge the notion of cultural authenticity amid transnational realities, while they underscoring the multiple modernities that inform our own Asian American population's daily lives. And so here, these two pieces are from the Childhood Dream collection. And so she did say that the tight folds, what she was looking at, sort of rough 17th century rough collars. Here in our European, our French, our 18th century France galleries, I placed this one gown from the Courtyard collection. So referencing the style popularized by Marie Antoinette, who Guo Pei is very fond of for her fashion acumen, the Queen of France at her countryside, the Petite Trian. This ensemble pairs a fine cotton petticoat with a fully embroidered jacket featuring an elongated train. The jacket's shape borrows from the cut of the late 18th century retticoats. inspired by men's riding coats. The ready coat is distinguished by its cutaway skirt, which reveals the underskirt. Guo Pei's Baroque scrollwork, embroidered in a range of pastel blues, further evokes the queen and her distinct aesthetic. And here in our British galleries, Guo Pei, we've paired this, and this is kind of a funny story, but if you'll see on the image on the right, when Guo walked the galleries were red, and we painted them green in the convenient years. And so I said to her, well, the galleries aren't red anymore. And she goes, how can I choose which pieces to put in the galleries if I don't know the paint color? And so we sent her photos of the painted galleries, and I said, oh, but it actually came out a little bit more blue. And this is all going on. I'm at home in my apartment. I'm not working at the museum. She's in Beijing. This is all Zoom and email and PowerPoint presentations. And she says, well, I need to know the true color. And so my favorite art technician went to the museum and because I wasn't allowed in, only central staff were allowed in at the time, and took a picture of the paint can. And we sent it to Guo Pei so she could choose which pieces. Anyway, she chose these pieces. And she said she coyly plays with the dress codes of the ruling classes, reimagining the Chinese dragon robe worn by the members of the imperial court into a conservative tailored overcoat, a modern classic favored by Western dignitaries at state events. Its surface and border is embroidered with a repeated wave motif in silver threads, which hopefully you can see, and in a silver thread chain and laid stitches, while dragons swim amongst the foliate and cloud patterns finely worked in silk threads and satin stitch. And that reference of it being an interpretation of imperial robe was first from Buyong Chen, who's one of my two academic advisors on this project. And my colleague, Laura Camerlingo, said it reminded her of what a woman, a dignitary would wear at a state event. And since we're in the British galleries, I'm referring this as my Kate Middleton coat. So we're going to walk through some of the other pairings, and it is just amazing. People are just amazed that they thought that either Guo Pei was commissioned to make these pieces that fit into our galleries, or that we actually moved things into the galleries to fit her designs, but neither. We just did, it was just sort of creative pairing. So here is from her Legends collection that was inspired by the Cathedral of St. Abbey. But we've put it underneath this, one of my favorite pieces in the Fine Arts Museum's collection, which is a ceiling from the Palacio de Almatra. So this was one of a tower, and this comes from a tower from outside of Toledo, Spain. And the palace was built at the time of the Christian conquest of the southern Spain from the excelling the Muslim inhabitants. So following the unification of Spain under Catholic rule, Jews, Muslims, and other non-Catholics were forced to convert or be expelled. With a diameter of 18 feet and weighing approximately 4,000 pounds, the ceiling dome is made of interlocking sections of gilt and painted wood. The classical motifs such as leaves and blossoms are inscribed within an elaborate Islamic lattice, frames with laurel leaves and scalloped shells that symbolize the convergence of the pilgrimage routes at the shrine of the James the Great, the patron saint of Spain. The synthesis of the Christian Islamic elements exemplified the Mujar styles based on Islamic architectural style that is particular to southern Spain. And so I think it's a beautiful sort of, and it's sort of, we enter into the final gallery which is, this is another gallery. Sorry. I'm going to skip that. Now we enter into because we're running out of time. We enter into the final gallery. And so that sort of leads into this idea that throughout history, culture has been borrowing from each other, influence each other's artistic practices. And that is what sort of, we end in the Gallery 1 at the Legion of Honor, where we've paired works from our European decorative arts collection with Guo Pei's designs. So Guo Pei says, the culture of China is just like the blood that runs through my veins. It's my life. China has more than 5,000 years of history, even longer culturally speaking. The history has greatly enriched my designs, and it's essentially the foundation of my work. Elements of the phoenix, dragons, and totems about ancestors, or even our memories, they flow through my designs. And while your traditional designs, Chinese motifs permeate her collections, as I said earlier, they're not classically Chinese. They're amalgamation of culture and artistic influences that include European art, architecture, and historical fashion. In this way, her designs reflect the contemporary fashion practices. And these pairings of her designs with the works in the Fine Arts Museum's European decorative art collections make evident the art historical roots of the Sino-European object, a hybrid form dating to the 17th century. Guo Pei continues and expands on this practice, amplifying the fusion of Chinese art with the diverse traditions and styles through her fantastical designs and approach and global reach. And so that's an larger scale. And here we have one of the most important tapestries in the Fine Arts Museum's collection. It belongs to a series depicting the Chinese monarch, probably Kajing, sorry for the pronunciation, in this interpretation. So this is the audience for the emperor. In this interpretation, the emperor sits like an idol surrounded by guards, European couturiers, and rare animals such as elephant, griffin, sphinx, and peacock. In today's context, such chinoiserie depictions may read as uninformed or Eurocentric. However, the tapestry dates to a period when court cultures in both France and China were equally awed by one another and engaged in an active exchange of gifts as a means to showcase the artistry of their royal workshops. 6 tapestries from a later series were sent to the Qinglong Emperor as a gift from Louis XV. Louis XV, sorry. The emperor proudly displayed the set in his European palace. As a byproduct of this cross-cultural trade, Chinese artists studied the tapestries, developed their own wool tapestry manufacturing, and exploited took the imagery in their depictions of European court dress. And so this whole Western beauties tradition grew out of this sort of exchange. And then here we have a piece from her Legend of the Dragons, where it's this magnificent beauty. So I just wanted to share that. I would say that when we showed it, the empress in her dragon robe obscured the emperor, and my exhibition designer Alejandro Stein just loved that. He said, that it was sort of women rule, and the women was. This is one of her most iconic looks. And in fact, one of the reasons why we got the Guo Pei show is that my now director had been director at the Met when China Through the Looking Glass took place, and this was in the China Through the Looking Glass piece. So this piece has been shown many times, and in fact, there was an exhibition at the Asian Civilizations Museum, and the curator there, Jackie Young, showed it with Chinese ceramics. But I am here showing it alongside Meisenware. So So this is in a very similar fashion, that there's sort of competition. These different emperors would send things back and forth, and then thinking that they were going to open up trade routes, but instead the artists went and learned the techniques and copied them. So imports of Chinese and more rarely Japanese porcelain into Europe increased significantly during the 17th century, but by making of porcelain remained a mystery to the European ceramic manufacturers. The Meissen factory in Germany was the first European enterprise to succeed in making true hard-paste porcelain in an Asian manner. And many of its early wares were directly inspired by East Asian precedents. And so that what we see here on the vase. But here we see Guo Pei's design, and she frequently explores China's artistic practices in her work as a way to acknowledge the loss of traditional craft. The iconic design is homage to the blue and white ceramics, one of China's most well-known and enduring products, which has been imitated globally and a recurring theme in the designer's work. This example is made of hand-painted silk and embroidered with silk threads and Swarovski crystals, while the dress's sculptural silhouette is reminiscent of a folding fan. Atop the mannequin's or model's head sits a broken vase that has been glued back together, and its cracks are accentuated with Swarovski crystals, a symbol of Guo Pei's support for the revival of Chinese decorative arts. And then I just wanted to talk about, just to end with this quote from these two scholars, that fashion speaks to communities beyond borders, involving an interlingual process and translations across cultures, media, and industrial and commercial sectors. Thinking about East Asia through transnational fashion allows us to analyze creative and cultural distinctiveness in the relation to imitation, transformation, and exchange, and to look for dialogues rather than oppositions between the global and the local. And I think that Guo Pei's work has really sort of masterfully achieves that. Thank you. I'm free to take any questions. Oh, yes.
So can you talk about how long did it take to install these incredible costumes? It must have been a tremendous endeavor.
Yeah, so the question was, how long did it take to install? And I guess that's really going to depend on who you ask now. I think from the beginning to end, the majority of the installation took place over a 2.5-month period. But what happened was 7 of the sort of most iconic pieces came in advance because they were because we had to photograph them for the exhibition catalog, which I have as a gift for Mrs. Light. But we had 7 pieces were not in Beijing. They did the photography in Beijing, and 7 were in Paris. And so they sent them to Paris. They sent them from Paris, and our team had never seen anything like this, because if we had been installing, normally Guo Pei would send her team, and she would send a team of about 10 people. But because of COVID, we were unable to do that. And so this, again, why I showed you the inside of that one piece, they're so unconventional that they really had to learn how to handle these things. And so some pieces, like Samsara, not very heavy, but it took 11 people to put it on the mannequin. So that, just dressing those 7 pieces for photography took over a month. We staffed up. We hired an additional 4 trained costume mounters but everything had to be made in there. Of course, I was saying that they're 13 to 16 inch heels, and we're an earthquake country. So our mount maker had to make 2 mounts for every shoe, which was, I thought I was being so clever, and we found out how much everything weighed, but then everything had to, so that was a big, so it took a lot.
Can you put, or someone I was before, how long did the Chihuly exhibit take to put up? I don't think it was that long.
No.
Not your question, when it was here, I'm asking about the
Oh.
KIA. It was well over a month.
I'm sure it was at least 4 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks.
I'm just trying to put that in
Absolutely.
juxtaposition.
I know, but Chihuly, we had Chihuly come to our museum too. And when you take a Chihuly show, you get Chihuly's team. And they are like, I just remember they'd be like throwing the glass vases to each other. I mean, they're just like, doot, doot, doot. I mean, they're like conveyor belt. And which would, it would have taken less time if Guo Pei's team could have come, but they couldn't. Yes.
I'm going to ask a stupid question. I mean, these things are works of art. I mean, they're not to be worn. I mean, they're spectacular works of art on their own. So were they designed for real people?
Yes, the question was, were these designed for real people? And the answer is no. No, this is so, which is why that whole long preamble about her history is that, so for years, I mean, her first 10 years doing ready to wear and really being on that first wave, just creating a new wardrobe coming out of the Cultural Revolution. And then she starts her own company, and for 10 years, she's making beautiful handmade pieces that she sees as heirloom goods. She wants them to be passed down from mother to the daughter and to be sort of to last forever. And they're very sort of traditional and conservative, beautifully embroidered quipu or jackets. But she's an artist. And she studied in school really with artists and by professors who are artists. And so she has all this creative energy. And so she started to make in 2006 with Samsara collection to make these elaborate performance pieces just for her own artistic expression. And she's quite successful. She has over 400 private clients. And so this is where she's putting her time and her energy and her love. And so she's not selling these pieces. And we're going to send, Shannon's going to be sending out an email afterwards with some links. I interviewed her remotely, and at the last thing she says in the interview, I said, "What's next?" And she said, "Well, I'm thinking about opening my own museum." I will say this, I met Guo Pei for the first time in 2013. She came to the Dion, and in 2012, she invited me to her runway show. And I thought, this is really interesting. I'm not a buyer at Neiman Marcus. I'm not a fashion reporter. I'm a museum curator. So you have an understanding of where she thinks is right for her work. Yes.
How old is she?
She is, how old? Guo Pei is 56. Yes.
What is your favorite piece of hers and why?
Oh, we always say as curators, we're not allowed to have a favorite piece. But I do maybe have a favorite collection. I have a few favorite collections, but I really love the Childhood Dream collection because I feel like it has all it's early, but it has all the elements to me that define Guo Pei's oeuvre. It's got all that beautiful handwork. It's got the personal narrative of being pregnant with her daughter. It's got the personal narrative of a travel to Spain and seeing the embroidery, the origami, which she says comes from that she learned as a child, making her own toys. But then it has all the cultural references, the looking at, 17th century Dutch lace colors to, she says she got her pastels, the color from French pastels. And so to me, that just, because it defines her working mechanism. I think in a similar way, I also love the Himalaya collection quite a bit. Yes.
Has she lived all of her life inside China?
Yes. Yes. It's really cute that you asked it. So has she lived her whole life in China? Yes. And I asked, where she studied, and she goes, I was born in Beijing. I live in Beijing. I studied in Beijing. I still live in Beijing. She's very proud of her Chinese heritage. Yes.
At the end, you had a photograph showing the dragon gown
Mhm.
with the emperor's tapestry in the back.
Yes.
My question is, looking at the floor of that gallery, it seemed to have a three-dimensional appearance.
Oh, the dragon robe?
Yeah, there.
Yes.
Does that truly have a three-dimensional if I was standing in that room?
The dress?
No, the floor.
Oh, no.
I mean,
No.
the way it's photographed, it's
No,
just-
the floor is not three-dimensional, but the dress is.
The reason I ask is that we have a floor in our house that does have a three-dimensional floor, depending on where you stand.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the funding of her collections? Clearly, these are extremely expensive.
Well, yeah, I don't really know, to be honest, but I will say she is quite successful, right? I think that, so what initially, and I will say this, as time goes by, and anyone who works in the business world, which I don't, so funny, no, anyway, is that, when she initiated Rose Studio, and she was bespoke, so it was all custom made, and she and her husband came up with a unique business model, which was to have a club. And so you buy in at a certain level, and depending at what level you buy in, you get a certain amount of garments. And I believe she might be moving away from that. But she has, and again, like any couturier, even in the French system, there's a lot of privacy. People aren't telling you who their clients are. So I don't know exactly up to the date, but I think I read in 2017, she had about 425 private clients. Now, so if she's one of China's top couturiers, that means she's one of the top couturiers in the world. In 2010, they were reporting that there are only 200 couture buyers in the West. So if there's only 200, do you understand how successful she is? Yes, it's expensive. She's a really hardworking, very successful woman. She also has a lot of licensing deals. She designed the Mickey and Minnie for Disney. For the Chinese Lunar New Year. She's designed a Barbie doll, so she's doing different things. But yes.
Is there a way in which you were personally impacted by getting to know her, working with these incredible designs?
I was asked that before. How was I personally impacted? I will say this is that I think she's a true inspiration because she leads by inspiration. She leads by imagination. I think that, she says if you can bring fantasy into your world, then you can inspire others. And the other thing is that, it was challenging putting the exhibition together during COVID. And there was moments where I just didn't think we could pull it off. And her husband was really it's more important than ever. This is when we really need to do it. And this idea of using your art form or your creativity to bring joy and hope into other people's lives. And that is so at the core of what she wants. And, it's making people so happy. And that was just
as an art professional, like that's our job. That's our job. And so that was really like, and she's just reminding us of that, right? So, yeah. Yes.
How many other art museums have shown this collection?
How many other art museums have shown this collection? So she has shown her work before. So I'm going to forget what year, but the Savannah College of Art and Design had an exhibition, maybe 2016. This is the largest by far. 2016, which I think they called Beyond Couture, and it traveled to the Bowers Museum in Orange County and to the Bowers Museum in Orange County and the Vancouver Museum in Canada. And that was about 40 pieces. So there's definitely more pieces here and later collections. And then in 2019, the Asian Civilization Museum did an exhibition, which I think was Guo Pei Art and Culture. And they were the ones who paired, but they really looked at only the collections that were by have the Asian influence. And because they paired her work with their collection. So in the way that we paired her European influence pieces with our European collections, they used their Asian pieces. Yes. Last question.
Having worked with preparers here, and I remember we got the Shibuli chandelier in like 6 huge boxes. We had to wire it all together. And we had to ship things too. How did these things get shipped to you? Because you can't hold them up in a suitcase. So how do you ship something like that big umbrella skirt and things like that? Huge boxes?
Well, you know what? I will say this. I don't, because it's being recorded. There are different ways to ship costume. In fact, they were packed and shipped by her 23-year-old daughter, and not costume mounders. And no offense, it's just not. She's studying fashion. She's like, I'm not a textile conservator. But normally, if you were going to do this, what they do is you make a big crate, and you have acid-free boxes, and they're large, and you break them out by the components, and then you slide them in like they are a dresser drawers. So these crates are actually will come to you like a bureau, and then you pull out your acid-free box. And with hers, you would just have a deeper drawer.
I was just wondering if your train is like 15, 20 feet long, how do you have to somehow roll it up carefully and to
lot of acid-free tissue. and they make we call them snakes. They're made out of foam, and you fold them. A lot of gentle folding. Roll, things get rolled. Rolling your textiles is always good. Roll your text if you have anything nice and special at home. Roll it, don't fold it.